Great. So we'll continue now with the panel on SD-WAN and Zero Trust. My name is Daniel Bardlev. I'm on the staff of MEF. I work on developing strategic programs in MEF. Many of you know me already. And what we've been doing over the last 5 years, is working very intensively on defining what is SD-WAN. And more recently, I think there's a little bit of, thank you. There seems to be background noise coming. Thanks, Nan. You can just turn the mic off. Tremendous. Thank you so much. So we've been defining SD-WAN and MEF-70 and more recent 70.1 and SASE in MEF-W117 and Zero Trust in MEF-W118. A lot of work going on there on the standardization side. And we have the opportunity today to hear from Patrick Donegan from Ardenstance and Dominika Koncevic from Omdia on their thoughts and their understanding of where we are in the market, how things are trending, both in SD-WAN and Zero Trust. So perhaps I'll just ask Patrick, you just to give a little bit of background about yourself.
Oh, sure. Yep. So my trajectory has gone somewhat similarly to the MEFs over the last few years. So 6-7 years ago, I was chief analyst with heavy reading, focused on very much on the networking space. And then 5 years ago, I created Ardenstance as my own company, which is focused on the intersection of telecom and cybersecurity, which, as I say, one could draw really close parallels between the direction I've taken over the last few years and the direction that MEF's taken. So that's really all I think I need to say.
And Dominika?
Yes, so my name is Dominika Koncevic. I've joined Omdia last year. And I was going to say a similar thing about being a bit of a MEF in our organization, because I started first at the vendor side at Intel and then moved to research houses. And what I found extraordinary at Omdia is that we have dozens of analysts touching on a variety of topics. And even preparing for today's presentation, I looked through dozens of surveys and researches and white papers to combine the best insight for you guys today. But my role is focusing on SD-WAN and cloud services at Cloud and Data Center Research Practice.
Great, thank you, Dominika. So perhaps we'll start off with you, Patrick. I think
no, we won't.
You won't. We won't. It's Dominika.
Yes.
Oh, my apologies.
It's ladies first.
Ladies first. Thank you. Wonderful. So over to you, Dominika.
Yes, thank you so much. So we've already done the introduction. So again, thank you so much for having me today. And as I've mentioned already, we cover quite a lot at Omdia. So my role sits within Cloud and Data Center Research Practice. We cover quite a lot of topics within the team in two ways, which covers from top to bottom, including hardware, software, to services, but also on the other hand, two sides of the vendor side, and we also speak to end users by creating surveys and interviews. And we are seeing growth of investments in IT infrastructure, data centers, and this is always fueled by enterprises' need for cloud services. And in fact, pandemic acted as a booster for enterprises spent on cloud services, and so to deal with staff shortages and revenue shortages, reductions, and issues with remote working. And so we think that SD-WAN sits very well in our team as well to understand the ecosystem and to understand what drives the growth of cloud and data centers. But this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to what we are covering. It's not just us, we have other teams covering and touching on SD-WAN. We have teams starting from cybersecurity, service providers, or even AI and IoT teams. So for today, as I've mentioned earlier, I've gathered all the information to give you a wide spectrum of what's happening in the market from vendor side, MSPs, and end users. So during pandemic, enterprises continue their investments in transition projects, and SD-WAN, growth of SD-WAN continued, adoption of SD-WAN continued. And in our enterprise network service survey, we have found out that 62% of enterprises have some sort of experience of SD-WAN in 2021, which is up from 56% in 2020. And that meant $3.6 billion when it comes to revenues generated by SD-WAN vendors, and that's 28% more compared to prior year. And also from the same survey, we found out that 87% of surveyed enterprises expect to have some sort of SD-WAN deployment at some locations. So what is really shaping the SD-WAN market? I've highlighted a few trends we already mentioned today at different panels, so I will share with you our takes and what we found throughout our research and insights on these topics. So starting with first element, driving any project, and it's a starting point for any project, which is money. And we are expecting enterprises to grow their spending on IT solutions. Based on our enterprise IT insight, in 2021, over 30% of surveyed enterprises were willing to increase their investments in IT solutions. However, for 2022, the expectation is from 60% of enterprises to increase their investments in IT solutions. Also, when we looked at surveys focused more on network services, we have found out that during pandemic, the investments in SD-WAN were not significantly impacted by COVID. Enterprises were more interested in accelerating adoption of bandwidth on demand, hybrid networking. SD-WAN deployments were still taking place. We're not talking about significant acceleration. On the other hand, we've noticed from that survey that a pandemic affected the deployment timelines. So there were some delays in terms of SD-WAN deployments. Also, we know that refresh cycles when it comes to enterprise IT investments last about 5 years. For those enterprises that rejected SD-WAN due to its immaturity in 2017-18, might be now interested in pushing the deployment and adopt SD-WAN in coming year, which potentially could help with that higher penetration and the increase in terms of penetration. Next big trend that we talked about today as well, enterprise networks become more distributed, driven by work from home, work from anywhere trends. From another survey that we conducted last year, we found out that 94% of SD-WAN adopters are providing it to select group of work from home workers. And speaking to and reviewing MSPs, SD-WAN for work from home become a new pitch feature as well. And speaking to vendors, all the conversations are starting with, yes, remote working is driving that SD-WAN deployments. However, it is graduate. So we do see enterprises focusing more on executives, more senior positions to provide them the same user experience at home as in the office. Then another point will be edge computing. We talked about it today quite a lot as well. Also in our server report, we have noted that number of servers intended for the edge are expected to double within next 5 years. And the edge cloud is definitely an emerging service and is gaining a lot of interest from enterprises. And there's a lot of adoption. SD-WAN married with edge computing will definitely benefit from each other and help to bring more value to enterprises. However, as with any new technology, there is a lot of excitement as much as challenges. And based on our surveys and conversations with enterprises, there's still a lot to do around it. So there is need for education, there is the lack of in-house skills, and this is where service providers could come in with some use cases scenarios with a bit of a reality check and help enterprises to adopt Edge. Next point, of course, major pain point for many CEOs is and IT management and IT decision makers is security. So security was highlighted in many conversations, in many surveys, and 30% of surveyed enterprises chose security as a top benefit of SD-WAN. Also in another survey that we conducted with enterprises, and when we asked how important are the following technology areas to your organization, managed security, and identity and privacy become #1. Also when it comes to MSPs and what the features are they are pitching, in one of our surveys, security was one of the top 2 features. And so that's why we are as well seeing more and more vendors offering SD-WAN in combination with security, or as well we are hearing from vendors that security is another level or upsell option with the existing customers. And AI, we talked about automation and how SD-WAN is a quite complex topic. We are as well hearing from CEOs in many meetings another pain point, which is staffing. So basically we are hearing of lack of, again, skills in-house. Regardless of what industry and what company we're talking about, it was quite surprising to hear, as this is one of the challenges apart from supply shortages, and then people shortages was another topic. So definitely creating sustainable and simple software that could help enterprises to manage their tools would be definitely something that could push the SD-WAN forward. And then something that we talked about as well, so digital transformation and overall shift towards cloud is something that is driving SD-WAN massively. Vendors are highlighting still how much is to be done in terms of migration to cloud, and definitely SD-WAN is helping here, helping enterprises with the cloud migration. And in the same survey, as you might have noticed earlier, when we ask about which technologies are more important for your organizations, then you can see intelligent automation, artificial intelligence, Adobe Cloud and services in the top answers as a top technology for organizations. And also speaking of AI, within Omdia, we have another report talking about AI operations. And from that report, the data shows that AI ops will replace IT operational analytics and will grow about 25% CAGR by 2024. And also a benefit of having analysts in the room is to getting more data. So I would like to share with you another data point, which is a forecast based on our recent report for SD-WAN platform with an SD-WAN platform tracker. And when we talk about the market size, we talk about the revenues generated by SD-WAN vendors. So as I mentioned at the beginning, in 2021 in our report, the SD-WAN market reached $3.6 billion, and the expectation for 2022 is around $4.3 billion, so around 20% more. And as for next 5 years, we're expecting 14% growth. And yes, you could notice that 21% is less than 28%, but again, apart from remote working and work from home, next pain point mentioned by vendors is the shortages. The vendors who believe that they are dealing with shortages the best say that they have around 100, 150 days lead time, which is really good. While those who are struggling more is about 300, 400 days or even more. So once this issue is overcome by SD-WAN vendors, we should see probably stronger 2023. The expectation for this to be overcome is around end of this year or beginning of 2023. And also when we talk about the outlook and the future of SD-WAN, of course, work from home, because as I've mentioned, at the moment, the deployments are with key employees, the more senior employees. So in the future, we will see more deployments and multi-cloud, NFVs. This is as well coming from the conversation around how to deal with the shortages, how to avoid, a bottleneck when we don't have enough hardware. And also 5G was one of the highlights or something that vendors are planning to focus on. And what I would like to leave you with as a sort of summary of my thoughts while collecting all the information and feedback from either vendors, MSPs, or reports and surveys while speaking to enterprises is SD-WAN remains still a very complex solution for enterprises to deploy, to manage. Enterprises adopt vendor platforms in a different way for different needs. SD-WAN vendors' feature sets differ. There are different ways of deployment, different way of approaching security, performance, presentation, etc. And so there are many options, and also the concern on making bad decisions add the challenge to SD-WAN migration. So anything that could help to decrease that stress and worry around committing to something that is not good fit will be definitely help to accelerate the migration with SD-WAN. So simplicity, flexibility. I think in one of the panels have been mentioned that we did so much around the solution to provide amazing solution, but now we need to move on to help to launch it, help to quickly adopt SD-WAN with a simplicity and flexibility. So that's all from me. Thank you,
Dominika. One question for you. Was there anything that stood out that surprised you when you were doing this research that you didn't expect to hear?
I think it's still surprising to hear how mature the market is, and looking at the penetration rates, how still there is still sort of misunderstanding and still complexity, and how with such a amazing solutions that vendors are pushing so much in the market, there is more focus on help us to do how to do it. We need something more simple, be more flexible. I think that was sort of surprising to see that.
Interesting, thank you. Patrick, over to you.
Thank you. Well, I love that. Hello. I love that you were able to do that sitting down. That was so elegant. I can't. I have to strut. I'm afraid I'm going to have to strut while I speak. Okay, so when we present ourselves at an airport, we are accorded different access rights to different domains, different resources, if you like, depending on who we are. If we're a passenger, we have the right to access BA flight 123 to Madrid, or we have the right to access Air India flight 345. We have different rights if we are first-class passengers and we have access to the lounge, or we don't have access to the lounge. We have different rights of access if we are baggage handlers, if we are cleaners, if we are air traffic controllers, if we are restaurant workers. Our identity as we make our way through an airport is perpetually re-authenticated, reauthorized, re-verified. And this is airport security as we know it, and it keeps us safe from terrorists, from people traffickers, from common or garden thieves. Enterprise security is not like that today. The default is that we get wholesale access to a large amount of resources, some of which we do need access to, some of which we don't in many cases. We are not permanently or frequently re-authenticated, reauthorized, re-verified. We get in, we're in. And that's the way enterprise security generally works today. The airport environment is a low trust environment, and this is where we need to get in terms of enterprise security. Zero trust is a target architecture for reducing trust in enterprise IT environments to make enterprise security more like airport security and reduce the risks to the organization from cyber threats. I read that carefully because you have to sort of be really quite specific about what you're talking about with these things. Within the cybersecurity sector, we've understood what the problem of trust is going back many, many years. It's not anywhere new. And I want to draw your attention here to the bottom right-hand corner, because this concept of zero trust, the idea of full stack verification, the idea that of being monitored, re-authenticated, reauthorized frequently, if not ultimately, long-term in real time. We are so far from being able to realize that. It's unbelievable. There are a huge assortment of definitions, products, solutions available from all sorts of different vendors and players. The definition of what zero trust is and how it manifests itself in different product types is extremely varied throughout the industry. We have precious little commonality in the way that we approach things. What's also missing, it's so missing it's not even on the chart, is standards. We have absolutely very, very few standards together. If you are a large organization, a big bank, a big wholesaler of some kind, you have it in your budget to be able to define your own zero trust architecture and work with vendors to define that, execute on it over time. The vast majority of organizations do not have those types of resources and are going to be dependent on smaller players, on managed partners to deliver those types of services for you. And for that to happen requires a standardized environment. Ooh. There are, within the industry, and I think it speaks a little bit to what Frank, the point Frank made this morning about SASE, something of the same situation exists in terms of the definition and the language of zero trust. In Infosec, in the cybersecurity sector, people understand what zero trust is. It's a very Infosec term. People like it. People understand the problem of trust and use the term zero trust quite frequently. Outside of this, outside of the Infosec sector, it's a very controversial term. If you're a marketeer, you don't like the term zero trust because it's kind of negative, it's kind of crappy. Zero trust. Ugh. Marketeers don't like the term. CEOs and HR people don't like the term. Please see attached a new company memo relating to the zero trust architecture that we have developed for all of you. And that includes all of you, part of this zero trust architecture. A lot of people don't like it. You're an MSP or an MSSP. How do you position zero trust to a client when in the whole essence of your pitch is you want to be their trusted partner? How do you do that and then sell them zero trust at the same time? So what I've put here is what I've defined as a monetization-driven view of zero trust, and I think it fairly accurately represents how you guys, in the roles that you have in your organizations, in the service provider space, obviously, how you view zero trust. And I think you see it as being able to lead in addressing and resolving market confusion and immaturity. Tick in box, great. And above all, generate new revenues, selling zero trust solutions to customers. Now, I think this is exactly the right direction for you as service providers. I think it's exactly the right direction for MEF as well. The value of zero trust, as I articulated in the airport analogy, I think is self-evident. The demand from customers, particularly the 80% of enterprise customers, the demand for managed services is going to be very high because these folks don't have the ability to architect and deploy this themselves. And who else is better placed than the CSP community to deliver on those services? So I think, the whole essence of this, from MEF's perspective, from a service provider perspective, is absolutely spot on. I love this. I recommend that you love it. I love that MEF loves it. But you knew there was a but coming, didn't it? It was all set up for the but. Let's look at a broader view of opportunity and risk with Zero Trust. Kaseya is a leading provider of IT management software with thousands of customers worldwide, extremely popular with MSPs, MSSPs. Last July, Kaseya was hacked by REvil, a Russian ransomware gang. Hacking Kaseya gave REvil access to around 50 MSPs, 50, which in turn enabled REvil to drop ransomware into the environments of between 800 and 1,500 of their customers. I'm going to use that again for emphasis, between 800 and 1,500 of their customers, whose those MSPs were using Kaseya. 50 MSPs had far too much in Kaseya. Between 800 and 1,500 end customers had far too much trust in those 50 MSPs. The clients of those software vendors' servers attached to those software vendors' servers frequently just do what they're told. There's no interaction, there's no interrogation, there's no query. They just act as they're instructed to. And that is a fundamental problem. Hardly any verification carried out on those instructions. So that's the wider take on Zero Trust. That's part of the but that I mentioned. So now I want to summarize. This is exactly the same slide as I showed you a couple of slides ago. Sorry. But what I've done is I've introduced two red bits. So there's all the nice, fuzzy, warm stuff that you want to see. There's all the nice, fuzzy, make money, monetize Zero Trust that you're all here to see. But there's these two kind of red pain in the ass blocks in there that I've dropped in there just to annoy you. On behalf of the security folks that you've left back home, because back at Orange, back at BT, back at whatever service provider you represent, there are internal security folks who are looking at how to deploy Zero Trust internally within your own organizations. And as the Kaseya hack showed quite clearly, and indeed as the SolarWinds hack showed, MSPs and MSSPs are a fundamental security risk. Excess trust in those organizations is a fundamental risk in its own right. So in my view, what you guys do, what you guys are trying to achieve here is extremely important. But at the same time, I think you need to be linked up. You need to be joining the dots with your own internal security guys back in your offices. You need a Zero Trust strategy that integrates what it is that you're going to offer to your external customers with what it is you're going to do internally back home. Because imagine the conversation with the customer as you roll out your Zero Trust portfolio. We've got a terrific portfolio of Zero Trust products and services. You wouldn't believe how good it is. Which one would you like to buy? Oh, great. Well, Zero Trust, we find that kind of confusion. What experience do you have of it deploying it back home within your own organization? Oh. Sorry, is that the time? I better be going. Oops. I am not suggesting for 1 second that what your own security people do back within your telco organization needs to map exactly or even very closely to the portfolio that you offer out to the external market. I couldn't suggest that in a million years. A telco is a wildly different organization to a pharmaceuticals company or a chain of restaurants. Completely different. However, I am suggesting there should be at least some overlap. So can you succeed as an MSSP selling zero trust services without that overlap and integration that I talked about? Yeah, you probably can, sure. But I would suggest to you that you're bound to be able to do a very, very much better job, be far more credible, and have much better clarity on what it is you're doing and selling into clients if you do have that overlap. I want to leave you with one last further point to reinforce my case. The UK recently passed the Telecom Security Act. It was a bill, it's now an act. And it is a real landmark piece of legislation in terms of the requirements that it sets for telecom operators in the UK. The company draft code of practice here lays out the requirements in more than 100 pages of detail. That middle page there, I think that might be page 60 or something. That page there goes into great detail about what the draft code of practice is going to expect of how telcos protect the management plane of their in the telecom network organization. It's 108 pages long. I think the consultation period actually finishes next week. But this is a very big deal in terms of the security expectations that the British government has of British telcos. It doesn't mention zero trust anywhere in the document. It doesn't matter. The principles are deeply embedded throughout. The UK has been and still is a leader in cybersecurity, including in telecom security. I'd be very surprised if other European countries and other countries further afield weren't looking at raising the bar in terms of what they expect of their telcos from a security point of view. So I guess whether you're ready or not, whether you like it or not, if you don't get the case for mapping how you do your own security to the services that you offer out to your customers, if you don't get it, the regulators will get it for you. And it's coming whether you like it or not. I think really, I've actually said everything I want to say. I think that's basically it. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Just one quick question for you.
Yeah.
Coming back to the airport analogy. I think intuitively everybody understands that baggage handlers and cleaners and airline staff, they walk around with tags and they have an understanding of what authentication and authorization is in that use case of an airport. We just see it very, very often. What's your impression of the understanding of authentication and authorization among the people that you speak to in terms of the enterprise and security, IT security? Do they understand what authentication and authorization is in depth, or is there a lot more education that needs to go on in that space?
The security sector itself, the security professionals have a pretty clear view on it. The huge challenge is to try and make it seamless from a user perspective, whilst also maintaining security. And there are various layers of technology that have been tried over the years. That's the big. It needs to be seamless. It needs to be invisible. The user needs to not even know that they're being tracked, that they're being authenticated, unless there's some kind of a problem. In which case, they might have to respond to a phone call. They might have to respond to a text just to re-authenticate them for a particular reason. But the fundamental with it is it has to be easy. It has to be easy to use. It has to be simple and as invisible as possible to the user. It's a big challenge, but that's the requirement.
Tremendous. I think we're under a little bit of timetable. We've got a few more minutes. Are there any questions from the audience? Mehmet from Verizon. Perhaps Tom will give you a microphone so everyone can hear you.
I was going to give you the clicker. That's not going to work, is it?
Thank you. Just a really quick question. Edge versus cloud. And also, I believe you mentioned the substantial investment for IT. At least, I guess you said 20% or something more increase from enterprise side. Does that mean they are weighing more onto the edge so that they put more resources under their edge rather than the cloud itself? What is your really perception of that after talking to the ISM enterprise customers and things? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. The survey that I've presented was in general IT. It's investment in any IT solution. So it was more about, how much money do we have in any improvements? But when it comes to spending, we talk about more about cloud spending on cloud and enterprise shifting to cloud. There's still a lot to do, a lot of enterprises need to still shift to cloud. So I would say it's more on cloud. Does that answer your question?
Any additional questions from the audience? Right. Well, thank you very much indeed, Dominika. Thank you, Patrick. There's a lot more discussion to be had. We're just at the beginning of educating the market on what MEF is doing in SD-WAN and Zero Trust and SASE. So thank you very much indeed for helping us in that endeavor. Thank you.